traveling with Jesus and examining his teachings from the Sermon on the Mount. This is week 10. We have 2 more weeks after this, and then we'll be at Easter, the celebration of his resurrection. This morning, we're going to look at 6 verses, but they're very deep. And the reason that they're deep is because they universally apply to each of us. There's not one person sitting in this room that his words won't speak to if your heart's open. And if your heart is open and you really look at and listen to what he has to say, I believe that these words, if they fall deeply into the places of your heart where they can spring up into life, that it has the capacity to change us. Because what he speaks to is very real now. We've been looking from the beginning about what Jesus feels is a God-blessed life, what it means to have a great life. And he sort of redefined our understandings of this right from the beginning of chapter 5 with the Beatitudes. And as he walked through and taught us, he helped us to see things just a little bit differently. And every week after that first week where we looked at what those blessings were, we've looked at the fact that there are obstacles to blessing. Every time there's going to be blessing that comes your way, it's not just going to come easily or smoothly. There are going to be obstacles. And you and I know from having looked at and listened to his teachings that there are many, many obstacles that we can trip up on. We've looked at the issue of anger and how if that takes root in us, how it can really not only poison us, but fracture relationships. We've looked at the issue of lust. See, Jesus was not only getting at sort of the outward actions, he's always looking to get at the heart. So his issues weren't so much with what the religious leaders were, like adultery, like divorce with the fracturing of relationship. It really goes deeper than that to the issue of lust. And we've looked at that. We've looked at, last week, we looked at what it means to be stressed out and to carry anxiety and worries and concerns. We looked at the power of our words, how we can tear down and build up. There are a lot of things that are easily for you and I obstacles. And what I've noticed about the obstacle that we will look at and deal with today is that it is very different from many of the other ones that we have the capacity to deal with. Like, for example, when you and I are angry, we know that we're angry. We can try to hide that, and sometimes we can be successful, but when we're seething, when there is real anger inside of us, we know it. We experience it, and so as we identify and deal with that, and some of us have to get help on that, it is very much of a reality for you and I, some of us who deal with anger. It is very much of a reality that we know if we don't get a handle on this, it's going to get a handle on us. And it's ultimately going to take us out of a place of peace, a place of joy, a place of blessing. We know, those of us who deal with the issue of lust, how powerful and how addictive that can be. The industry of pornography is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it plays on this issue of the lust of our hearts. We know, those of us who are stressed out and anxious and worried, we know when we're stressed out and anxious and worried. Counselors and therapists and pastors' office, they're filled with people who can't find a good night's sleep, who are looking for a pill. The pharmacists make tens of billions of dollars on sleep aids to help people who are stressed out. So there are lots of issues that when we have them, we know we have them. There's no real hiding. But this issue today that we're going to look at, the biggest problem with this issue today is that most of the time when we deal with this issue, we are unaware that we even have it. And that is this feeling of superiority or being judgmental towards someone else. Now, I have to say, in all of the years, and it's been almost 20 years that I've been here, I have never, ever once, I've had people come to my office for a lot of different things, but I have never, ever once had somebody come in and sit down and say to me, you know, I am really super judgmental. I have this superiority complex and I don't know what to do with it. Could you help me? Never once, not once. The problem with this feeling of superiority towards other people is that you're blind to it yourself. When you hear other people speaking about others, you hear that and it sounds terrible, but when you're doing it, it's somehow as if it doesn't apply. I would venture to bet that almost all of us deal with this issue on some level. And Jesus says, last week, he said, you know what? Anxiety and stress and worry, it'll mess you up. It's an obstacle to blessing. But he says, when you're worried about other people too, and you're bringing judgment on them, same thing. It will block your blessing. And so this morning what I want to do is I want to look at 6 verses in Matthew chapter 7. And as we're listening to these verses, I don't want us to think about someone else. Because that's what we do sometimes when we're reading the scriptures. We think, oh, I wish this person was here for this. This really applies to them. Now this one's for you. Completely and totally for you. And as you apply it to yourself, I'll do the same with me. And let's see if we can't listen to the wisdom of what Jesus has to offer here. We're going to break it down and just read the first couple of verses to start. This is a problem with us. And most of us don't even know it. And Jesus says it blocks blessing. Verse 1. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. Now, just before we delve down into that reality, because that's a mouthful. I mean, if you think about the reality of the standard that you use by which to judge others will be the exact same one that comes back on you, that's a bit scary. Right? We'll get there in a second. Now, who is Jesus' audience? We've been here for 10 weeks, but I just want to remind you so that we're clear on who he's talking to, because anytime you find that there is a teaching in the Scriptures, you have to consider the context. Now, so who is Jesus speaking to? Who's he speaking to? He's speaking to his students, his disciples, his followers, but they are primarily made up of who? Peasants, slaves, poor, those people who've been judged their whole life. Those people who have been looked down upon, who have been marginalized, who have not been considered by those in positions of authority, the religious leaders, the financial and economic leaders, those who are in positions of power in Rome. They have constantly had the boot of someone else on their neck. And so you say to yourself, well, if that's the case, and he's talking to these people who have constantly been judged, why in the world would he be giving this message to them? Shouldn't he be giving this message to those who have been doing the judging? And the answer is yes, he does that often as well. Luke 18, John 4, he often will speak to those who are in positions of power and authority and speak to them about this very same issue. In fact, Jesus speaks to this issue over and over and over again. You know why? Because it's a problem. It's not only a problem for those who are in positions of power, it's a problem for those who are not. Now think about this for just a second. We talked about this last week. When people like you, you tend to what? You like them back. You don't even care about all of their idiosyncrasies. What is the word? Syncrasies, thank you. You don't even care. So you don't care about their pet peeves and just the minor irritants that others might, but if somebody really likes, respects, enjoys your company, you like them back. If somebody doesn't like you, and it's clear they don't like you and don't have time for you, and you know because you've heard secondhand, thirdhand, that they've said stuff about you, none of you would ever do that, but it happens in our world. If people do that to you, you don't like them, no matter how cool they are, do you? I mean, no matter how cool they are, if you know they don't like you, there's something inside of you that just immediately wants to respond back in kind. I cry. That's how it is. And so when we get to this place and he's talking to these people who have been judged their entire life, he knows that human nature is, when people have oppressed you, the first thing you want to do when you get into a position to do so is to do it back. They think that Jesus has come to establish a new kingdom, and he has. And they think that when he establishes this new kingdom, kingdom, that they will be the ones who are in control, and they can do to Rome what Rome did to them. They can do to the religious leaders what the religious leaders did to them. They want their day. And so he's saying to this very same group, I want you to understand the very same principle that I've been teaching those who are in positions of power since I had the opportunity to. Now, when we think about this issue of judgment, here's what we need to know. Judgment not only just diminishes our humanity, the one who is doing the judging, but also the one who is being judged. It shrivels our soul and it destroys community. There is no real possibility for community when I am placing judgment over and against you. I cannot love you if I am judging you. Can I? In fact, when judgment is rampant, when judgment abounds, the only thing that really can bring about change is absent, and that is love. You cannot hold both together and expect that you will have what Jesus is preaching about, the kingdom of heaven drawing near. Now, one of the things that I want us to understand as we're moving forward, just about the nature of our own life and those that we live with, is we will make it our aim to do one of two things when we are in community with one another. We will be quick to listen and slow to speak, which means that we will more likely be in this place of extending compassion and love, or we will, from a place of all knowledge, believe that we know what's best all the time and in every place, and bring judgment against those who differ from us. Because all of us have beliefs, we all have convictions, we all hold tightly to certain things that we believe to be true. And when that gets violated, check yourself and see what your response is. Can you think about the last time that you were in a conversation with somebody or you were engaged with somebody that in some way disagreed with you? I want you to just think about that for a second. This happens often with me. There are often times during a given week where I'll be having a conversation with somebody and they just think differently. It is neither bad nor good. It's just different. Okay? And I can put myself in a position where I'm open to learning from them, even if I think that what they believe is not right. Or I can judge them and try to convert them to my way of thinking. Not because I love them and I'm sad that they are in darkness, but because I think they're wrong, and thus being wrong, they're bad. You see the difference between the two? And when I think like that, what is absent in my heart is the only thing that can bring about real change. Love. I cannot be judgmental towards you and love you at the same time. I just can't. It doesn't work. Did you know that? So anytime that we are looking at an issue, and I want you to really think about this. Anytime that we are talking with a person and looking at an issue that we feel is wrong or that we need to correct, I just want you to pay attention to your heart as you're engaging this other person. Because correction should always come from a place of compassion. Correction should always come from a place of love. But when it comes from a place of judgment, me looking down on you, me treating you as other, I have somehow moved away from what is central to the teachings of Christ, and that's love. Now, I want for you just to consider for a moment the last time that someone passed judgment on you. Probably won't take long, but just think in your head for a moment about the last interaction that you had where you felt judged by somebody. Shouldn't be real hard. I want you to think about that. Now, as you're getting that in your mind, I want you to think about the feelings associated with this interaction. Do you remember why it was that the person was passing judgment on you? They might have said something to you, or you might have just noticed it in their response. Like, we can send messages in lots of different ways about our judgment, don't we? We don't have to out and out say, you're an idiot. We can do that with our faces, with our bodies. We can do that in a number of different ways. There are lots of times that I feel judged and a person didn't say a single word to me, but I still felt it, right? You get that energy, don't you? So when was the last time that someone placed onto you some kind of judgment? And then I want you to think about, why was it that you had that interaction with them? What was that about? Okay? Now, finally, how did that make you feel? It made you feel great, didn't it? It built you up. It made you feel excited to face your day, hopeful about your future, great about the relationship you had. It felt awful, right? There is never any time where one is feeling judged that it gives you warm fuzzies. Right? It makes you feel terrible. Why does it make you feel bad? I mean, just talk to me for a second. Why does feeling judged, looked down on, marginalized, why does it make you feel so bad?
Insecurity.
Okay? We are insecure. Every single one of us walks around and we have insecurities. Some of them are similar and some of them are different, but we're all insecure. And it doesn't do much to help our insecurities, does it? Why does it feel so bad?
It calls you out on something that maybe you are.
Sometimes, yes, there's this, I know that I'm in the wrong, and the truth is kind of getting at this place of conviction in me, and part of that's good. Part of that's good when we're not in a good place, and somebody speaks truth into our life, and it reveals something that we need to see to change. But if the spirit isn't right, I can miss that truth. Right? Somebody can tell me what is true and help me to identify a problem that I have, but if they do it in the wrong way, I just want to punch them in the face. Right? So, is that just me? Yes. There you go, be this way. So we're in this place where people make these judgments, and it just makes us feel lousy. But if we turn the page and remember the last time that we passed judgment on someone else. See, it feels terrible when it's done to us. And yet, we do the same. There's no one in this room who can say to me with any integrity that you've never done this. All of us have done this. And so we're in this place of feeling wounded by what people think and say and do. And yet we return the favor in kind and we wound away. And I just want you to think about why, and the very same feelings that you felt about how it might be that you're making others feel. Because if I had enough forethought before I actually passed judgment on somebody about how it was going to make them feel, I think it might cause me to just be a little bit slower to speak. If I knew that they were going to make me feel like I had just been made to feel a few hours previous by somebody else, maybe, unless I was trying to be vindictive, unless I had so much anger and unforgiveness built up that I think the power to destroy them with my words would be such that it could, maybe there would be something in me that just said, stop, you don't need to go there. What you're about to tell them is true, but you don't have the right spirit to do it right now. And not only are they not going to hear it, they're probably going to dismiss it down the road because of the way that you came at it. And so if the goal is restoration, if the goal is healing, if the goal is redemption, we need to pay attention with what's going on inside of us, lest the exact same standard that we use towards other people be used on us. So I just want to ask you, as we're moving through this passage, would you like the exact same standard that you use by which you judge others to be used back to you? If the answer that you say is yes, then you're in a good place. And if it's not, then I want you to reconsider how it is that you look upon others. Because when judgment exists, what is absent is love. And so I think more important and more significant than any of the things that we are pointing out in other people, I think the very worst possible thing that you and I can do is to live with a spirit of lovelessness. It's worse than anything that we would point out in anyone else. And so Jesus, like he has been in his teachings, he's getting at the heart. He's getting at our hearts. And he says, that in-law, or that outlaw, or that mother, father, sister, brother, co-worker, that person that you just despise, I need you to take a look at your heart. Because even if the things that you think about them are in fact true, the way that you feel about them is not good. And it's not only destroying the possibility of relationship, it's destroying and shriveling your very soul. Worse than anything else that you can point out in someone else is your lack of love. And you need to pay attention to that. So, one of the things I was thinking through is that it's that when we look at and think about other people as being wrong, and we identify the fact that the things that they think or they believe are different than ours, then one of the things that begins to happen inside of ourselves is that we convince ourselves that they're not worthy of our love and service. We do this all the time, don't we? I mean, think about an individual or perhaps a group of people that you think are just wrong. Easy to do that with politics, right? Easy to do that with people who subscribe to different religious beliefs, right? Think about a person or a group of people that you just think are wrong. And then not only do you add to their wrongness, you just think because they're wrong, they're bad. How in the world does that help to usher into the kingdom of heaven? I think, in fact, the exclusion and condemnation of others is what fuels so much of what is broken in our world today. I really do. I wonder if we could just begin to discern the difference between seeing somebody who holds to a different belief or different understanding, or perhaps is wrong in a given situation, and not take that wrongness and move it onto them and create like a group of people that are just bad. Jesus is going to continue. But the first thing that he says as we're moving forward is, he says, you want a God-blessed life? Then be careful about your judgments. Because the way in which you judge, the same standard is going to be applied to you. We continue as we move to verse 3, verses 3 through 5. He says, why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, hey, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye, when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye, and then you can see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. He's using humor, right? So can you imagine, like, this picture? It's an absurd picture. It's a picture of a guy with a log hanging out of his eye who's trying to get close enough to see the speck in his friend. The log's like, bumping in and hitting the guy. He says to him, when you are trying to look at and deal with the problems of other people, one of the things that oftentimes happens is that you've not first taken a look in the mirror at your own life. Because if you were to have done such, you wouldn't be so quick to examine the life of somebody else and tell them about all the ways in which they are wrong or bad. He said, being in a position where you can show discernment and make wise judgments involves a little humility. The reason I can be with you and not judge you is because I'm in touch with my own humanity. I realize the sin in my life that needs attention first before I look at you. And my sin helps me to have compassion towards you because I know what it's like to wrestle and struggle with my sin. With holding on to stuff that I know is going to do me damage. With holding on to stuff that I know is going to block my blessing. With holding on to stuff that I know is destroying relationships, but somehow, some way, I haven't found the ability to let it go just yet. And when I'm in touch with that part of my humanity, then when I look at you, and I perhaps see the speck that is in your eye, I might be more likely to have compassion towards you because I know what it feels like. But when I've forgotten what it feels like, then I'm quick to judge. And I just want to ask you a question, not that I want you to answer out loud, but I just want you to consider, have you forgotten what it feels like to be human? Have you forgotten what it feels like to be weighted down by sin? When we forget these things, we are quick to put onto other people our own stuff. And Jesus uses this funny picture. He says, you got a big log hanging out your eye. Why are you looking at the speck in somebody else's? He says, first get rid of the log in your own eye, and then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend. The progression here as he's teaching is this. He says, first, take a look at your own life. Then, before the great king, humble yourself. Be honest about who you are and who you aren't. About where you are and where you're not. About what's going on in your personal world. Then, with compassion, recognize that the compassion that he has shown to you with your failures is a compassion that you should share with others. One of the things I think that oftentimes trips us up is that maybe perhaps we are in touch with our humanity, but we don't really realize the compassion that's been shown towards us in Jesus Christ. Did you know that in Christ, your sins are forgiven? That in Christ, there is healing for your brokenness. That in Christ, there is no condemnation. That in Christ there's a capacity as we open ourselves in all of our woundedness to experience His touch that we can be made well. Sometimes I think we live in the shame of our mistakes and we beat ourselves up worse, making the situation that we find ourselves in worse than it was before we got started on ourselves. We judge ourselves. The reason it's so easy to judge other people is because we're so judgmental about who we are. It just oozes out of us. And after a while, it's just a mess. I've judged myself. I hate myself. I hate you. I judge you. It's just a big mess. It doesn't lead to life. It leads to death. And so, when Jesus is teaching, He uses this crazy example of this guy with a big log hanging out of his eye, trying to look at this small speck in somebody else's. Perhaps, when we're in touch with the fact that we are forgiven of our sin, and though our sin be great, that it took a great deal of compassion to do so, perhaps, from what we receive, we can give. But you know, until you receive compassion and love, you don't have it to give. If you've got nothing in the tank, you've got nothing in the tank. So maybe the first step is opening your own heart to the possibility of redemption. Because Jesus says it doesn't really matter what you've done or where you've been or who you've done it to. If you open to me, I have the capacity to forgive your sin, to heal your heart, to change your life. If you'll walk in that, I'll teach you a new way. And I'll lead you towards the kingdom of heaven, which is coming as you walk this out. It is here now among you. It is within you. Would you open to it? And then he has this last verse, which I think I never understood why it was connected. It seemed a little bit odd because the first 5 verses seemed to like work together. And then there was this last verse. And as I've been, learning and studying and growing and thinking about it, it makes perfect sense to me how verse 6 goes with verse 5. So let me just read that to you. He says, don't waste what is holy on people who are unholy. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. Sounds like a country song, doesn't it? Pearls to pigs. For they will trample the pearls, and then they will turn and they will attack you. First 5 verses, Jesus is talking about the dangers of being a judgmental person. But in the last verse, he's talking about the value and the wisdom of having judgment, wise judgment in your life, being able to make discerning decisions. See, there's a world of difference between judging and being judgmental. Okay? Judgmental, the definition, is to point out something wrong in someone else's life, making the person feel put down, excluded, and marginalized. This is always fueled by self-righteousness. In the first 5 verses, Jesus is saying this is wrong and it's deadly. Okay? But in verse 6, he's saying basically that wise judgment is discerning between good and bad, right and wrong, critical for every follower of Christ to possess, and this is fueled by wisdom. So on one hand, judgmentalism, it's fueled by self-righteousness. The other, being able to judge and discern and make wise decisions, that's fueled by wisdom. So, let me see if I can make an example here. So, you're a young couple and you have 3 small children. And you want to have a night out together. You want to go out on a date, and you haven't been out in like 6 months because you're not really sure if you leave like your 6-month-old and your 18-month-old and your 3-year-old. If you leave them, you're just not very comfortable leaving them in the care of just anybody. So if I'm going to find a sitter that I can be at peace, where my wife and I go out and have a good night, I'm going to have to use discernment and judgment about who I call in to be with my 3 kids, right? I have to be wise. I can't just pick anybody. Or if I'm thinking about getting married, right? And I'm really in love with this person, and they're really in love with me. I have to be sound in my discernment about who I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, lest I make the wrong choice, and the rest of my life be marked by having lived with a person that I was totally incompatible with, and though I loved them, knew that I could not spend the rest of my life without constant chaos. It would be wise, it would be discerning, it would be good to show judgment, in this case, when picking a soulmate, would it not? Some of you know firsthand because you did it right, and some of you know firsthand because you did it wrong. You know. And so, in verse 6, what he's saying is, he says, there's a lot of times you're going to want to say something to someone. Right? There's a lot of times you're going to want to speak truth into a situation, to a person or a group of people. He said, but sometimes those people aren't going to want to hear it. You ever had that happen to you? Where you had something just revelational to say, but the thing that you had to say you knew wasn't going to be received? And not only was it not going to be received, it was not going to be received, and they were going to feel badly towards you. And maybe even on top of that, do violence to you. And so Jesus says, listen, there's a great deal of difference between being judgmental and wise in your judgment, okay? Being judgmental is terrible. It's fueled by self-righteousness, but showing wise judgment is important. It's fueled by wisdom. And he says, if you don't use wise judgment, if you cast your pearls before swine, you better be careful, because those swine not only don't want the pearls, they might turn on and attack you. And this happens too, doesn't it? That's why we have to show discernment in terms of what we say and how we act in the situations that we find ourselves in. Because not every moment is a now moment to speak what we need to speak. Did you know that? Not every moment's a now moment. I first have to check my heart, and then I have to check yours. I have to check the temperature of this conversation, because if I rush in and say something or do something, it might explode. And Jesus says it's like throwing pearls before pigs. They won't appreciate it. Okay? So be careful. Don't do it. And so, if I could sum up kind of what he's saying in these first 6 verses is, if you want a God-blessed life, do not ever diminish or demean another person for any reason, ever. And don't be dumb. Don't be, those are my words. Don't be unwise when a situation calls for critical thinking. Because you could put yourself into a position where violence will be done to you as a result. Don't throw your pearls before pigs. They will not appreciate it, and they may well turn on you and attack you. There is a place for judgment. Sound, critical thinking, judgment to make wise decisions in situations in life that are important. That much is true. Just don't, from a moral high holy ground, look down on other people and think, what a loser they are. Fill in the blank. He said, because that would be as if you were looking at a speck of log in your own eye. First, look at your own life, humble yourself, and from the compassion you receive, share it. And I would just say, as I bring this to a close, I think there are two basic things that I want you to take out of this. Number one, and all of us are in this place. If you find yourself looking at and making judgments on others, either with what you say or what you think, your facial, your body actions, if you just find yourself being a judgmental person overall, would you just, in the moment of your judgments this week, let's just start with today. Would every time that you find yourself going there, would you just stop and look at your own life for a few minutes? The next time you feel prompted to, say or think something badly about somebody else, would you just stop for a moment and think about your own life? And when you recognize that you have need for compassion, would you cry out to God and ask Him to forgive you for all of the junk that exists inside of you, for all the things that blocks blessing? Would you do that? And then, upon receiving that compassion and mercy and grace and forgiveness, would you be willing to extend that to the person that you were going to make the judgment on? Because they need it as much as you do. They do. And the only thing that's going to help bring about the kingdom of heaven that Jesus is talking about is our doing this. The kingdom of heaven is not going to come when we stand with crossed arms and furrowed brows, thinking poorly of one another. Because when I'm judging you, I don't love you at all. I've totally missed you. I don't get you at all. And there's no chance for you and I to be in a relationship. But if I can, with open hands, receive mercy and feel forgiven, then perhaps I'm free to give that back to you. This is such wisdom from Jesus. He's inviting us to a new way of life. And the new way of life takes hold when we walk in it. Not when we say, wow, that's profound, that's good, that's when we walk in it. And I have this dream that one day we will be a judgment-free church. But the only way that we can become a judgment-free church is by becoming a judgment-free individual. Because we're just made up of a group of people. But we need to be smart as well, to be wise, to be discerning. So I want you to think about that. And let's pray. I wonder how often my blessing is blocked by the judgments I've formed over the years. In places of my own insecurity. In places of my own unforgiveness. Lord, would you speak to us about what we are so often blind to? Would you help us to see ourselves? Would you help us to open to you, to your love, which is the only thing that can heal? And would you renew us to the point where our joy pours forth in our giving what we receive to others, that your kingdom would come and your will be done, in this place as in the heavens. It's in Christ's name. As the team returns, we're going to sing one final song, so if you would stand.